So we are starting on page Vav, about 8 lines from the top. I didn't count exactly. The line begins with the word makom. Thank you. We are learning the principle that the Alte Rebbe presents in Torah in Posech Eliyahu. Where he says that ein aroch ba'olam hazeh that the ein aroch, the distance of atzilus relative to Ayin Soif is greater than the distance of Olam Hazeh, our world, relative to atzilus. And as I said, this seems to be counterintuitive, since that Ayin Soif and atzilus, it seems that Ayin and atzilus are both ruchnis. Atzilus is also ruchnis. Talking Olam Hazeh, this is a lower world, Gashmis, Gabe ruchnis. That distance should be, we would think, would be greater than atzilus to Ayin Soif. And we say no. And there is a principle in this that we say no, atzilus l'gabe Ayin Sof is a greater distance than Olam Hazeh l'gabe atzilus.
Does it have to do with what an aura is compared to what is essence?
Okay, he's going to explain it. I mean, we're going to try to understand what he explains. The inyan of Ayin aroch means there is no significance. There's no significance of atzilus relative to Ayin Soif. And similarly, there's no significance of Olam Hazeh relative to atzilus. But the absence of significance of atzilus in comparison to Ayin Soif is greater than the absence of significance of Olam Hazeh l'gabe atzilus. As I said, we're going to start in the line that begins with makom. Kihine. For behold, this is going to be explaining this principle. Bitul oilam ha'elyon. The bitul of the upper world. Negdoi yizborich. In relative to a negdoi, to atzilus, or Ayin Soif. Why is oilam ha'elyon bottled to negdoi yizborich? Who mitzad, it is due to the fact, shehu nivra, that the world of atzilus is nivra, is a creation. V'choluk mimenu, and it is distinct and separate from Ayin Soif. And therefore Ayin Soif gives it sustenance every moment. And if not for the hashpah of Ein Sof, or love upon the upper world, hoya kloi hoya, then he would be like he was never there. And I want to discuss this just in the way that Rebbe presents it. We are speaking about the proximity between atzilus and Ein Sof. Why do we begin with the from beetle? Insignificance. How is this insignificance? Talk about the madrege, the level of this oil that we're talking about. So again, we have to start all the way from the beginning. The primary principle. The primary principle is that there is only one source, only one reality. Anything that is lacking connection or recognition of this one reality simply has no real presence. So we're saying like this: atzilus relative to Ein Sof. Why does atzilus recognize its insignificance? It is due to the fact that it is a creation from him, and it is separate from him. What is separate from him? Cholok mimenu is separate means he does not have that essential truth, essential presence that of its source. It's a separate entity, but it's getting sustenance from it. The sustenance that it's getting from it remains a sustenance. It does not make it one with the Ein Sof. Ein Sof is providing sustenance for it. Like we said the other day. I'm holding this up, and thus this phone is suspended in the air. How much of the koyach ha'odam, how much of my koyach, of my chayis, is transmitted to the phone, so that the phone now comes to live? It's suspended in midair. Is any of that transmitted to the phone? So it's obvious that it's not transmitted to the phone at all. It's being held up because I'm holding it. And that koyach of holding it up remains separate from the phone. It's made to stay up, not because it stays up, because it's being held up. And it does not have the element of staying up at all. My hand, okay, in contrast, is a living hand. Yes, and it has chayas in it, and it stays up, so to speak, because it has chayas in it. And it can do all kinds of different things that we discussed in the previous meeting. But that which is imbued in the object that the hand holds up is not imbued in the object. It remains a separate entity. That's called bria, a creation. It's not an emanation. It's not a continuation of the koyach ha'adam. So therefore, this is what we're saying. Atzilus, relative to Ayin Soif, is nivra and cholok mimenu. It is distinct from the Ayin Soif. In Ayin Soif itself, the principle of world doesn't exist. What?
Yeah, can I have something?
Well, let me just finish. So despite the fact that we say Atzilus is the highest world, it is still, however, a different phenomenon. It's a world phenomenon. It's not the Etzem, Oyer. And thus, because that it does not have its own, as you said before, everything has to be focused how much of the source is in it. There is none of the source in it. It is being maintained. It's distinct from the source, and now it's being maintained by the koyach Ayin Soif. And this is why Atzilus is bottle relative to Ayin Soif. What does the why mean? Because it does not have any of the truth of Ayin Soif itself. It does not have any presence of its own. Although it is Olam Ha'elyon.
So Atzilus is called Olam Elyon.
It is called Olam. It is Olam Ha'elyon. It is the upper world, the highest world. But nevertheless, it does not have any of the truth of the Ayin Soif. Why is it Olam Ha'elyon? This is the Inyan that we're still going to discuss, and this is because Atzilus has the cognizance that Ayin Soif, that is the truth. And because Atzilus has this cognizance and is completely bottled to accept this Inyan, that's why we say it's it's a higher world, the upper world. It doesn't get preoccupied with its own mitzias. This is what we say all the time, the beetle of Chochmah. Chochmah is a mitzias, is a koyach. But the koyach HaChochmah is so refined that it recognizes that the oil that is shining into it, that is the real truth, not its mitzias. So therefore, so now we're talking about the distance. See, atzilus from Ayin Soif is a greater distance than Bi'al Gabi Atzilus. Because the beetle of Atzilus, Gabi Ayin Soif, is that it does not have any of the truth of Ayin Soif itself. And the fact that it subsists It is there. It is maintained. Is because it is maintained by an outside koyach. But the koyach coming from Ein Sof. It is not something which is imbued in itself, within itself. Therefore, it is, so to speak, the distance, the comparison between a created entity versus the creator, and they're very distant. This Inyan will be revisited again and again, but just want to finish the Inyan. Avo, however, but the underline begins mimenu at the end. Avo bitul olam hazeh neged olam ha'elin. But the beetle of this world towards and against the olam ha'elin, the upper world. Yes, indeed, this world is bottled gabi the upper world. Einoi, that beetle is nothing more, elo only mitzad shehu choshuv mimenu. It's only because, in comparison, the upper world is more worthy, is of greater quality. Therefore, the difference between the upper world and the lower world is in quality, not in essence. The upper world is more choshev, is of a higher quality, and that's why the Olam HaTachton is bottled towards it. Sharehu gam kein olam, since that the upper world is also a world, shenikra olam ha'elyon, as the reference is, because olam ha'elyon, the upper world, shenizhav me'erin soy baruch. World means that it was created. Nizhav, it came to be. It became created. It's not an essential presence. Ein Sof is here, and therefore the world is here. No, it is intentionally created. Rak, except shuhu choshuv, that it has a special quality. And therefore the difference between Olam ha'elyon and Olam hazeh is b'maylo madrega haruchni. The difference is in the quality of the ruchnisike quality. V'herchek rab b'neihem, and therefore there is a great distance between Olam hazeh and atzilus, because atzilus is much more superior in terms of quality and ruchnis than Olam hazeh. However, still, Shneihem b'bchina achas, they are both b'bchina achas in the very same definition, defining element. And what is that? Shehem nivroyim u'mekabrim. What is the definition of world, whether it's Olam ha'elyon or Olam HaTachton? It is that shehem nivroyim u'mekablim, that they are creatures. They're there because they were created. U'mekablim, and they are recipients. What does that mean, they're recipients? That their entire presence is due to their recipient, the reception from Ein Sof, not due to their own presence. Okay, now that we have the vocabulary, this is a rare way of describing Shein. Their creations and the makablim, their recipients. How is that in comparison to Ein Sof? Ein Sof is not a makabel. Ein Sof, this is the essential reality. Not a makabel. There is not in Ayin Sof the element that it is not and comes into being. In Olam, even Olam atzilus, there is that element. So, Olam atzilus is a supreme world. But its supremacy consists in the fact that it receives from the Olam, from Ayin Sof, a greater hashpah, it receives it in a purer way. But it's still a recipient. It does not have it on its own. It's not the reality itself. So one might think that these words, it's a reality in itself, it's a recipient, which is the whole thing is based on Yeshus. What kind of is he a Balgaya? Is he independently an independent presence? So here is where, because of our thinking process, because of our world knowledge, this is where we must not allow ourselves to we stay focused on what this is, what the significance of this is. The Rambam says again that the first principle is to know that there's a first being. A first being means it's a being by its own design. It is there because of itself. Is that arouse a thought of Yeshus, or is that bring up a thought of absolute reality? Is it there because it's a yesh, or is it there because it's pure truth? Ayin Sof is not a makom. And all the qualities of Ayin Sof are not due to some kind of a solicitation, some kind of a reason. It is reality itself. This is the significance of the word Motzei Rishon we always emphasize. Rishon. Atzilus is a recipient from the Motzei Rishon, and therefore it has of supreme quality. But its supreme quality is due to the fact that it is a recipient from the Motzei Rishon. Therefore, in atzilus there is a sense that there isn't and there is, which means it's not the absolute truth. To give us a very coarse and distant illustration of this Inyan, although I'm sure you understand that this is not exactly what you mean to say. We all recognize the difference between learning, the human being learning how to behave like a human being, and then that effectively reveals what the human being is, or you train a dog. After the human being learns something, so this is appropriate behavior for a human being. Once he has learned that, then that behavior is no longer a learned behavior. Yes, a human being also has to learn. Why? Because it's a neshama in a goof and things are concealed. But once it is touched and it's revealed, then this is not a learned thing. This is the human element.
It's not learned saying it's original.
It's original. He behaved this because this is how this is in and of itself true. Lahavdil, the dog, when it's being trained to behave in a certain way, indefinitely, it is referring back to its training. It's never true in and of itself. I said you have to kind of recognize the point of this mashal is that's the union that this is something which is being maintained all the time. The training of the dog is, the action of the dog is maintained based on by what is being, what was being provided for it, not in and of itself. But clearly, we're talking about atzilus is chokhmah. This is like the human being. But the point is that it is a recipient. And this is the Rebbe's point over here. Nivra umekablim. Mekablim means that they receive their inspiration. Yes, they appreciate it. And that's why it's Olam HaElyon. It's Olam, and it's a supreme world because it appreciates this oil that is being given to it, and it seeks it. But it's only recipient of it. It doesn't have it on its own. Again, I said we'll still revisit it, but I think we should be getting a little bit of the point across. Ve'af, okay, let's continue. The line begins, Ava Mekomakim, it's smack in the middle of that paragraph. Ve'af, and although... Yes, Rabbi Shlomo.
Was always said that atzilus is an emanation according to all. So how can we reconcile it what we're saying now that atzilus is not an emanation?
It's a nivra.
A nivra, it's a makom.
Right. And okay, that's what I said. We're going to visit. Okay, so here's the principle. In the reality, as we said over here, atzilus is a nivra or makabel. It does not have anything of its own. The principle of being an emanation is in the fact that the manner in which atzilus receives the oil from Ein Sof is comparable, as we always speak, to the way Chochmah receives the Oil HaNefesh versus the other koiches. It is only a recipient, but it's a pure recipient. It does not take the oil that's provided for it and translate it in its own terms. It completely unites with it. This is why it's called an emanation. Nonetheless, it does not have the oil in and of itself. It's a recipient of that oil, but it is bottled to that oil. Then from Beetle, okay, we have to stop just to give us a handle on this principle. We mentioned the halacha that if a person carries on Shabbos a plate, and in the plate there's a morsel of food. So the halacha is that the plate is bottled to the food. To the extent that when you carry the plate with the food, you're not even on carrying, because the plate is bottled with food. And if the food does not have the shear hitzah, it doesn't have the minimal shear hitzah, then you put the hitzah. Okay. Now the plate is bottled with food as if it doesn't exist. Does the plate become the food? Or is it bottled? What is this beetle mean? It is no longer a plate. It is still a plate. But it dedicates its presence totally to the food. And therefore, the halacha says, this is not food, this is not a plate. But in actual fact, it is still a plate. It is not a plate only because of its beetle and dedication. And that's why it's called an emanation. It is pointing completely to the oil rather than to itself. And here's where we're going to stop. Shlomo, you got your answer? Hello?
Square.
Okay. All right. That's it for this morning.